A restoration assistant dismissed after claiming to have seen green velvet trays removed under armed escort. Even long-time courtiers admitted that certain questions were followed by sudden, uncomfortable silences. Some claimed the vault lay beneath Clarence House, an extension of the Queen Mother's private refuge, accessible only through corridors known to a select few. Others swore it was hidden at Sandringham, buried behind generations of renovations, its contents untouched since the war years. The truth was never confirmed, not until now. Not until Prince William, known for his caution and discipline, quietly broke the pattern and acknowledged that the rumours were not fantasies, that something had indeed been hidden, and that it was time it no longer was. Those closest to the inner circle say the confirmation did not come in a speech or a statement, but in a closed-door meeting that left senior aides visibly shaken. William, having gained deeper access to private royal records, reportedly encountered references that could no longer be ignored, coded notes, sealed annexes and inventory gaps that pointed unmistakably to one conclusion. The Queen Mother had preserved a legacy beyond public reach, a deliberate blackout, a controlled erasure. And within that silence, the outline of something monumental. What unsettled the palace most was not simply that the emerald set existed, but that it had been guarded with such precision. This was not neglect, it was protection. Someone had ensured that it would not be worn, not loaned, not even mentioned. Someone had decided its time had not yet come. For decades, the royal family lived above a secret they were never meant to touch. While generations passed unaware that a hidden inheritance was waiting beneath their feet, as word spread through select channels, speculation ignited like dry timber. Why would the Queen Mother remove a jewel collection from all public life? What history did it carry that the Crown feared to confront? And why, after so many years, was Prince William the one to open the door she had closed? The answers, aides whispered, lay not only in the vault, but in the documents that accompanied IT papers that did not merely list ownership, but intention. Because when those papers were finally unsealed, the revelation was not about emeralds alone. It was about choice, about foresight, about a name written with deliberate care, waiting for the moment it could no longer be denied. And in that single detail, the entire narrative of royal inheritance began to fracture. But confirmation was only the beginning. The true shock came with the name inscribed on the royal handover documents, not Camilla, not Anne, but Catherine. When senior staff opened what they believed to be routine transition documents, a single line in gold ink changed everything. To be reserved for Catherine, the Queen Mother's most protected possession, untouched and unacknowledged for decades, was now bearing the name of the Princess of Wales. But why her? And who made this decision behind closed doors? The moment the internal memorandum was leaked, panic set in behind the walls of the palace. The document marked reserved legacy, emerald set, was not just unexpected, it was explosive. In fine, deliberate handwriting, one line stood out above all, by express wish of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother. Those 8 words sent a jolt through the highest echelons of the royal household. This was no clerical oversight, no accident of inheritance. It was a deliberate, premeditated act, one kept secret for decades. And the intended recipient, not the current Queen Consort, not the monarch's only sister, but the Princess of Wales, Catherine. A woman who until now had no idea such a legacy existed. Multiple palace sources confirmed that Catherine was blindsided by the revelation. In a closed-door meeting, after being shown a copy of the authenticated document, she was said to be visibly shaken, her silence echoing louder than any spoken word. Her name, attached to an inheritance that had been veiled in royal secrecy, became more than a symbol, it became a spark, especially considering the timing. This leak didn't happen in isolation. It coincided almost perfectly with growing internal tensions between Catherine and Camilla, tensions that had, until now, remained behind smiles, curtsies, and closed doors. Palace aides were quick to contain the situation. Phones were seized, access logs were scrubbed, key members of staff were reassigned within hours of the leak. But the damage was done. What was meant to remain hidden had now become a question of loyalty, intent, and succession. And as whispers turned to stares in royal corridors, the question no one could answer became the most dangerous one of all. Who gave the order to release the document? And why now? Security around the vault was immediately tightened, but it wasn't the contents that worried palace officials. It was the implications. The Queen Mother had made a choice. She had bypassed tradition, ignored hierarchy, and handed a own jewel figuratively and literally to someone who decades ago didn't even belong to the family. And the evidence was irrefutable. Experts were called in to verify the handwriting, and despite intense internal resistance, the verdict was unanimous. The signature was hers, the phrasing consistent, the intent undeniable. Behind closed doors, senior royals struggled to understand how this had been allowed to happen. Some questioned whether the Queen Mother had confided in anyone else. Others wondered if Catherine's recent rise within the royal public image had anything to do with the timing. But as officials worked to seal the cracks, the public curiosity had already erupted, and the question of whether this was merely inheritance or a signal of something far greater began to grow. But if Catherine was unaware and the vault was sealed, how did the Queen Mother make such a choice? And what memories are locked in the gems themselves? Before they were locked away, the emeralds were more than adornments, they were symbols of resistance, heartbreak, and hidden affection. From secret exchanges during wartime to whispered betrayals in the corridors of Windsor, the Queen Mother's emeralds carry a story the Crown has never told. Until now, the origin of the emerald set stretches far beyond royal tradition, rooted in the turbulent years of the Second World War, a period that reshaped both nations and hearts. According to restricted files and whispered accounts passed between aging courtiers, the jewels were never part of any royal commission. They arrived under highly unusual circumstances, hand-delivered not by a British jeweller or royal envoy, but by a foreign dignitary whose ties to the Queen Mother remain cloaked in deliberate ambiguity. The man's name has been scrubbed from every official record, but the connection was undeniable. Those who served closest to her say the Queen Mother referred to him simply as the Protector, and in moments of solitude, she wore a ring from the set while reading his letters, which remained sealed until her death. It wasn't just the foreign origin of the gems that stirred unease, it was what they represented: hidden affection, allegiances formed outside the boundaries of royal duty. The emeralds became a private emblem of defiance at a time when appearances meant survival. But in the gilded hallways of monarchy, emotion is both currency and liability. And the moment their significance was suspected, the emeralds became dangerous. Jealousy, silent, festering, and fiercely territorial, began to form around them. Senior royals, already strained by the Queen Mother's powerful influence and wartime popularity, feared what these jewels implied: that even in the heart of monarchy, emotion could overpower duty, that a love, unspoken and unsanctioned, could live longer than any title. Palace historians have long hinted at tensions between the Queen Mother and her daughter, Queen Elizabeth II, during this era. Some insiders now claim the Queen refused to wear the emeralds, branding them improper. Others suggest she simply couldn't bear what they represented, a side of her mother that refused to yield to royal conformity. Whatever the truth, one fact is clear: shortly after her coronation, the entire set vanished. Not lost, hidden, carefully, intentionally, removed from all public access. In royal circles, the emeralds became legend, and in silence, they were mourned not for their sparkle, but for their meaning. Because for the Queen Mother, they weren't trophies, they were memories. The set was never seen again, and staff were instructed never to speak of it. As decades passed, the vault grew colder, but the emotional value of what lay within only deepened. An entire chapter of royal history, sealed behind layers of betrayal, love, and fear. And yet, while the set faded into silence, one member of the current royal family was quietly uncovering its secrets, and it wasn't King Charles. Behind closed doors, Prince William has been charting a path far from his father's shadow, but nothing prepared him for what he discovered while combing through the Queen Mother's correspondence. What he found would not only redefine Catherine's legacy, it would spark a cold war within the firm, In a quiet chamber deep within the royal archives where dust has settled on sealed boxes no monarch has dared to open in decades, Prince William was granted a privilege few ever receive. As the heir to the throne, he was given temporary access to a segment of personal documents belonging to the Queen Mother, long classified under royal restriction. At first it seemed like a formality, a routine act of historical housekeeping. But within a stack of aged letters and fading stationery, he found something that changed the course of royal history: coded references, fragments of thought cloaked in metaphor, all pointing toward one concealed legacy, the Emerald Set. The letters weren't just musings of an aging matriarch. They were intentional, loaded with allegory and veiled warnings. One particular envelope stood out unopened, marked with wax, and labelled simply, "To the one who understands grace." The contents shook him. In a careful and deliberate hand, the Queen Mother described not the gemstones, but the woman who would one day embody their spirit. A woman of restraint, patience, loyalty, and inner strength. A woman who had not yet entered the royal fold. And then, without ambiguity, her name, Catherine. William read the letter twice, then a third time. There was no misreading the message. This was not sentiment. This was instruction. The Queen Mother had chosen her successor in spirit long before the world knew her name. The letter made no mention of crowns or duty, but spoke instead of character, grace under fire, and quiet strength, the qualities she believed would one day be needed to steady the monarchy again. William reportedly took hours before leaving the room, returning to his residence with the kind of weight only a future king can carry. And yet he could not remain silent. Within days he brought the letter to his father, King Charles. Witnesses describe the meeting as tense and unrecorded. What was said has not been formally confirmed, but multiple sources close to the palace report William's words were firm: "This changes everything." Charles, caught off guard and unprepared for this kind of revelation, struggled to understand the implications. But it wasn't just the content of the letter that unsettled him. It was the timing. The shadows of resentment had already been gathering, and one of those shadows was Camilla. Some aides claim Camilla was informed later that day. Her reaction, according to insiders, was one of thinly veiled fury, not because she wanted the emeralds she had, her own legacy, but because the letter represented a shift in royal power and sentiment, a recalibration of loyalty. And once again, Catherine, silent and steadfast, was at the center of a storm she never asked for. Behind palace doors, the mood turned cold. Conversations changed. Glances hardened. Lines were quietly drawn, even among family. But as whispers spread and allegiances shifted, a dramatic confrontation would throw the entire palace into crisis mode. For years, Camilla believed the crown's treasures and legacy were hers to shape. But when she discovered the Emerald Set was never meant for her, rage ignited. What followed was an unprecedented royal clash, as Catherine remained silent and the crown trembled under the weight of old wounds and new loyalties. The moment the news reached Camilla, the palace air shifted. Gone were the carefully rehearsed smiles, the whispered diplomacy, the veneer of harmony. Behind closed doors, the queen consort was incandescent. Insiders revealed that she confronted Charles with more than disbelief. There was fury, a raw sense of betrayal that shook the very walls of Clarence House. Her demand was blunt: the Emerald Set must be reassigned or buried permanently. It was not enough to be overlooked, she wanted it erased. Not because of vanity, but because of what it symbolized: rejection. An invisible hand from the past had passed her over, and the wound cut deeper than protocol would allow her to admit. Charles found himself trapped between two fires. On one side stood the love of his life, the woman he had waited decades to be with. On the other, the ghost of his mother's mother, whose influence still haunted the throne he now occupied. There was no safe choice. Every path forward risked a fracture. For Charles, it was not merely a matter of jewels. It was about preserving unity, upholding legacy, and maintaining balance within a monarchy already burdened with public scrutiny. But the more he delayed, the more pressure mounted, and silence, in this case, was as damning as any decree. In the background, William had already made his stance clear, calm but unshakable. "This is not a negotiation," he reportedly told Charles during a closed-door meeting. "This is what she wanted, and I will honor it." His words were not a challenge, they were a declaration. William understood what the emeralds meant to the institution, to its history, and most of all to Catherine. And yet, while he stood firm, Catherine herself remained outwardly composed. Those closest to her described a woman deeply moved, but torn between loyalty to the crown and a desire to avoid confrontation. She urged for calm, for diplomacy, even as the air around her grew heavy with resentment. And then came the twist no one expected. As pressure built, a resurfaced remark from Queen Elizabeth II was quietly circulated among senior aides. "Some things are not hers to wear." The phrase, though never confirmed publicly, was interpreted as a veiled reference to Camilla, and it fueled speculation that even the late Queen had drawn lines between duty and inheritance. It was a chilling reminder that royal legacies are not only built by what is given, but by what is withheld. Behind every wall of the palace, there were whispers of allegiances shifting, of tensions rising. What had started as a rediscovery of a hidden treasure was fast becoming a war of symbolism. The emerald set no longer represented a private inheritance, it had become a battlefield. And while Catherine asked for peace, she stood at the eye of a storm that had been gathering for generations. And then, in an extraordinary move no one predicted, Princess Anne broke her silence and sided with the one woman the Queen Mother quietly chose. Known as the crown's most dutiful soldier, Princess Anne rarely comments on matters of inheritance or favoritism, but this time she made an exception. In a private meeting, overheard by palace aides, Anne's voice cut through generations of silence. Catherine was always meant to inherit this. The moment Princess Anne spoke, the entire atmosphere inside the palace shifted. She had always been the steadfast force behind the monarchy, unshaken, unsentimental, unbothered by drama. But her intervention on this matter was neither casual nor reactive. It was deliberate. According to sources who witnessed the exchange, Anne revealed that she had read a private letter from the Queen Mother in 2001, shortly after her passing, a letter that had been buried within confidential family correspondence. In that letter, the Queen Mother outlined her views on the future of the monarchy, not by name, but by the traits she believed would sustain it. Composure, devotion, strength without arrogance. And then a telling phrase, "One day she will wear them without needing to be told why." Anne, unshaken by the rising tension between Camilla and the rest of the family, made it clear. She didn't see the emeralds as ornaments. She saw them as symbols of a legacy that needed to be honored, not edited. Her tone was crisp, unwavering, as she reminded the room, "It's not about jewels, it's about legacy, and who's earned the right to carry it forward." Her words didn't carry sentiment, they carried weight, authority, and history. Camilla, who had been present at the beginning of the conversation, left the room without a word before Anne had even finished. There was no confrontation, only silence. A silence louder than any argument. Catherine, stunned by the defense she hadn't asked for, was said to have remained still as the room fell quiet. But as Anne turned to leave, Catherine reportedly stood and, with tears in her eyes, softly thanked her. No dramatic declarations, no royal theatre, ICS. Just two women, one embodying the past, the other quietly stepping into the future, meeting in a moment that felt more like a passing of a torch than a political alignment. Witnesses called it eerily quiet, as if the walls themselves understood something historic had just shifted. In the days that followed, a string of internal palace emails revealed a notable change. Protocol officers began reviewing the Queen Mother's legacy items with renewed scrutiny. Security teams were instructed to classify certain heirlooms under Catherine's future custodianship, quietly, systematically, without media notice. But the implications were clear. The monarchy was recalibrating, not by public proclamation, but through quiet, resolute acts of justice. As royal allies closed ranks behind Catherine, one final twist remained. The emeralds themselves had a secret no one saw coming. It wasn't until the set was examined under restoration lighting that curators discovered something startling: engraved initials, a date, and a single phrase in Latin. This wasn't just jewelry. It was a royal code, a message for the future, and its true meaning sent shivers through the palace. When the emerald set was finally placed under restoration review, It wasn't the craftsmanship that drew gasps. It was the language of secrets etched in gold and stone. Tucked behind the central clasp of the necklace, nearly invisible to the naked eye, was a delicate inscription. The Latin words read, Illi quae lucem fert, translated, for the one who carries light. The inscription alone sent curators into a frenzy. But when they uncovered the date next to it, April 29, 2011, shock turned into something else entirely. That date was no coincidence. It marked Catherine's very first royal engagement after marrying Prince William, a detail too precise, too personal to be accidental, but it didn't end there. Another set of markings initials, old and worn but unmistakably engraved, were traced to an individual long speculated to be the Queen Mother's wartime confidant, a man whose connection to her was fiercely protected and buried under decades of palace discretion. The matching of those initials with private correspondences found by William months earlier formed a pattern, a breadcrumb trail meticulously laid out over time. What had once been considered royal folklore was now materializing as truth in emerald and gold. And then came the locket. Hidden within the back of the necklace was a small, removable charm, sealed shut with an intricate hinge. It hadn't been noticed in previous examinations, likely because the set had never undergone full restoration since its last known wearing. With William's quiet authorization, the locket was opened and inside was a miniature portrait, faded but intact. It was not of a monarch nor a diplomat. It was the same man whose initials were etched beside the Latin phrase. A ghost from the Queen Mother's hidden past, immortalized not in a portrait gallery, but nestled in the one item she ensured would only resurface for the woman who would carry her light forward. When Catherine was shown the findings, those present described her reaction as first stunned, then deeply emotional. She reportedly held the necklace for several minutes before speaking, then asked for privacy. No photos, no press, no official statements. William, having followed the restoration's rationale, matched nearly every detail of a historic portrait of the Queen Mother herself, one long forgotten in royal archives. The resemblance wasn't superficial, it was spiritual, it was legacy reincarnated. The press, though not officially invited to the reception, were quick to seize on grainy images and leaked confirmations. Headlines across the globe lit up in real time. The ghost of the Queen Mother returns, the emeralds speak again, and perhaps most poignantly, history chooses her. One detail did not go unnoticed: Camilla's absence, unexplained, unacknowledged. It was as though the palace had quietly rewritten the seating plan, and no one dared to question it. Some speculated illness, others restraint. But the symbolism of her non-appearance, juxtaposed with Catherine's emerald-clad emergence, was impossible to ignore. The press didn't ask questions, they delivered judgment. The crown was shifting, not by force, not by crisis, but by clarity. Inside the palace, William was said to have been composed, his expression unreadable. But to those close to him, he made one private remark that now echoes across royal circles. Let history see what the crown has chosen. He wasn't speaking about power. He was speaking about permanence. Catherine had not taken something, she had become something. The set was not a prize. It was a passage. And through it she crossed a threshold that no title alone could grant. But even as the emeralds dazzled the world, the final revelation would seal the story in royal legend forever. Weeks after the emeralds were revealed, a sealed envelope arrived at Kensington Palace. Dated decades earlier, it was addressed simply to her, when the time is right. What Catherine read left her in tears and marked the final, irrefutable proof that this legacy was never a coincidence. The envelope had been hidden in the royal archives under restricted access for nearly 40 years, misfiled or perhaps deliberately obscured, until a junior archivist stumbled upon it during a cataloguing review, triggered by the emerald set's resurfacing. The handwriting on the envelope was immediately recognized. The same precise penmanship that had signed off on war documents, correspondences with presidents, and letters of condolence during the darkest days of the 20th century. It was unmistakably the Queen Mother's, and yet the words on the front of that envelope didn't name a recipient. They gave no title, no rank, only one line: to her, when the time is right. The contents of the letter were kept private, but key sources within the palace, including aides close to William and Catherine, revealed its essence. Written in 1985, the Queen Mother began by acknowledging that she would not live to meet the woman she was writing to. She referred to her not by name, but by essence, a future queen, whose strength would be found not in defiance or dominance, but in endurance, humility, and light. You will need strength, not spotlight. And in you, I sense both. These words, composed long before Catherine ever entered the royal orbit, seemed to echo with prophetic weight. The Queen Mother explained why she had chosen to hide the emerald set. She spoke of the burdens it carried, the heartbreak it had witnessed, and the healing it could one day bring. Her instructions were clear. The jewels were to remain sealed away until the crown found someone who mirrored their history, resilient, unshaken, luminous in silence. She warned that others would try to claim them, to twist their meaning, to rewrite their purpose, but she entrusted the reader with the truth. And with that trust came the final line: preserve them until grace finds its rightful bearer. When Catherine read the letter, aides say she was silent for a long time. Then, with trembling hands, she reportedly pressed the pages to her chest and wept. William, standing beside her, embraced her without speaking. No cameras, no statements, just a private moment between a man and the woman chosen by fate, and perhaps by something far older than fate, to carry a legacy rooted in both royalty and remembrance. The letter, now preserved under the Royal Legacy Protection Act, will never be displayed publicly. But its contents have already done what it was meant to do, confirm that this was never about privilege or favor. It was about purpose. And so the crown turned a silent page, not with ceremony, but with emerald light, a woman of grace, and a promise kept across generations. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.